Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are having a great day. Today we're going to talk about several different subjects. The first one being the market crash. Look, I understand these times are scary, but there are options. I'm going to discuss some of those options. But first, let's talk about why we had the market crash. Obviously, the illness that's going around caused the majority of the problems because you have bars and restaurants shutting down. It was just announced recently, all casinos in Las Vegas are shutting down. United States and Canada are talking about non-essential travel being closed off between the two countries. You're talking about all kinds of travel around the nation and internationally being affected. These are affecting all kinds of components of the economy, and we're going to see that continue. Now, I do have a list of things that I want to recommend or put out there as things for you guys to think about. But the thing that we're going to look at mostly is thinking about when we want to invest in times like this, what things are essential, what things are absolutely necessary to have and still are going to be purchased and still are going to have money flowing through those companies throughout the course of this type of event. So I'm looking at personally in my investment portfolio, I'm looking at companies like Costco. I'm looking at companies like Target. I'm looking at grocery companies like Kroger. But then I'm also looking at straight dividend companies and dividend investments like DVY as a straight dividend. Because if you look at companies that are solid, that 100% are going to survive this, have enough cash on hand, you're going to have to do your research to find that out, but they have plenty of cash on hand, but they pay out a good dividend, right now may be an opportunity for you to pick them up on the cheap. We never know when the bottom is going to hit. And, there's a bunch of stuff we're going to talk about in this video about things that the government is doing to try and help stave some of these things off, things that the Fed has done to try and help stave some of these things off. So you never know when those things are going to work or when there's going to be a breakthrough. I'm also looking at companies like mRNA and what was the other one here? SDGR is another one that I'm looking at, as these are companies that are involved in the vaccination that's hopefully coming soon for this illness, we'll call it. I'll be careful here. Don't want to get demonetized, even though I'm not even monetized yet. But you never know in the future and how this works out. So rather be safe than sorry. And you guys know what I'm talking about, anyways. And then on top of that, we've got the battle in the oil markets between Saudi Arabia and Russia going on right now. So that's just exasperating this market volatility and stuff like that. But those are some of the safe places that I'm kind of looking at and I'm monitoring as far as where to put my money. But the main thing that I'm looking at is what still pays a good dividend, what can I potentially get on a discount, and what companies, the biggest one more than anything is what companies, even during a downturn, even if they may have a bad quarter, they may have two bad quarters, overall they have enough cash on hand to survive through a crisis like this. They're still going to pay a good dividend, and hopefully I can pick them up on a discount. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the quantitative easing that the Fed announced. And now this was late last week, and that's going to take some time to happen. It's going to be about $700 billion. It's basically just them printing money and pumping it in through the financial sector directly into the economy, via them buying up bonds and treasuries and different things like that. And, the hope is that it really does help out. I'm not so sure about this one. I like the other thing that they did a little bit better. And we'll talk about that in a second. But quantitative easing, it has kind of staved some things off in the past. I'm just not sure in this type of event how that's going to play out. But we'll see. There are people inside the Fed that are far smarter than I am that are making these decisions, and hopefully they're the right decision, because $700 billion is a lot of money. Now, understand one thing a lot of people don't realize is the Fed, even though it's called the Fed, the central bank essentially, is not actually part of the government. They're a separate entity. I mean, they're kind of loosely tied together, but they are still a bit of a separate entity. And stuff like that. So they can do their own thing. They make their own decisions, especially with interest rates and all that stuff. And we'll get into that whole component in a second. But before we do, I'm going to ask you, please hit that like button. Really does help me out, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to the next thing that the Fed did was over the weekend, they announced that they are cutting 100 basis points off of the interest rate, dropping it down to 0 to 0.25, essentially almost making interest flat. Now, understand, that doesn't mean if you have a variable interest rate mortgage that your interest rate on your mortgage is going to drop to 0, because what happens is you have that basis and then the bank puts their interest rate on top of that. So the interest rate that you'll get from a bank is still a little bit obviously higher than that. Now, we should see interest rates drop in the mortgage industry. Hasn't quite come to fruition yet. I know a lot of people are from the banking industry saying, well, our rates already have some of these things baked in and stuff like that, but I doubt they have 1.5 points, which is what's been cut over the last couple of weeks, baked into their mortgages. Now, the challenge there is that so many people have been applying for refinances and for mortgages in the recent past, and going back even until the latter portion, quarter 3, quarter 4 of 2019, that the banks are still flush with all of these applications and all these things that they're trying to process. So they don't really have a lot of incentive to cut their interest rate. I mean, they will slowly, but look, it's not going to jettison back up to 1.5 or 2 anytime soon. This is going to hang on for a while. So if you want to just sit on the sidelines, I'd recommend sitting on the sidelines and just waiting until it maybe trickles down a little bit. Some of those applications get out of the way, and those banks do have to actually make the decision to cut their interest rates on the mortgages. Now, that is a catch-22. You know, recently we talked about in a video how to make sure that if you're putting money into savings and saving up that 6-month in case fund, that you want to make sure to put your money into an inflation beating savings account like Ally or Citi or Betterment and stuff like that. But the challenge there is, if the Fed is cutting interest rate, well, guess what the banks are going to do? They're going to cut their payout to the consumer. So unfortunately, that's going to hit a little bit. So if you can, and you can kind of weather it a little bit, just leave it in there and just hang out. If you're getting a little bit nervous, you can also look at some dividend funds that basically stay really flat. They have very, very low volatility, but they pay out a little bit better, and you still have the opportunity to get your hands on cash really quick. That's something that you can look at doing, but there is still a little bit of moderate risk there, because if it does drop, you are going to lose some of your principal, whereas if it was just sitting in a savings account, you don't lose some of your principal even if you are getting that dividend. So kind of have to weigh it out. Like I said in that video, everybody's needs are different. You're going to have to weigh out your personal needs when it comes to what you want to do with your money. Now, the last components that I want to talk about, are last things that were done, are very recent. They happened on Tuesday, and that was the announcement of deferral of tax payments on the Fed side. So on the federal side, for federal taxes, you still want to make sure you file your taxes if you're in the United States before April 15th. Obviously, if you guys are watching this after April 15th, hopefully you file your taxes. But they are giving a 90-day deferment, so you don't have to pay your taxes for 90 days after that. So what would that be? Roughly somewhere around June 15th, and in there, you know, there's 31 days in May, so it'll be more like June 14th, but keep track of that. But if you are an individual or a small business owner, you are going to be able to defer taxes on up to $1 million, and if you are a corporation, up to $10 million. So those are huge, especially if you're somebody who is making good money, you just lost your job, and then all of a sudden you're going to maybe have a tax payment due, and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Am I going to pay my rent? Am I going to pay my mortgage? Am I going to put food on the table, or am I going to pay my taxes? You know, obviously you could have filed an extension and push that off into October, which some of you may have already done, but the nice thing is this will buy you a little bit of time. We are going to get into a video later on in a couple of days that's going to talk about ways to make money on the internet and through different websites. So for those of you that maybe even, are laid off, or if you're somebody who works in a restaurant or something like that, maybe this will give you an opportunity to find some things that you can do to start making some extra money online while you're off work, and hopefully to complement the income that's missing, make up for some of that, and all of that good jazz. Now, one thing that's kind of a little bit disheartening is you do have companies right now like Marriott that are doing things where basically they're laying people off because, obviously people aren't traveling, they're staying in hotels. But when those people are going and filing for unemployment, the unemployment office is contacting their old employer, and the old employer is saying, no, they're just on 0 hours. And, it's kind of shady if you want to ask me. I really wish that companies wouldn't do that. People are going to be hurting. They're going to be dealing with loved ones that are getting sick. Come on, companies, don't do this crap. Be like, Amazon. No, sorry. Facebook just gave all 45,000 employees like $1,000. Amazon and Google are helping out with any type of computing power they can give to help find a cure for the vaccine, stuff like that. Be those companies. Be forward thinking. I recommend down in the description below a book called The Infinite Game. And in The Infinite Game, it always talks about infinite thinking and thinking, beyond just yourself. And, it's kind of really poignant right now, especially since we are dealing with something that can be so devastating. The other thing that was announced, or it's not really announced, but it's being looked at and that probably will come to fruition, is a little bit of a UBI. It looks like it's going to be somewhere around $1,000 sent to every adult in the United States. And that's great. The challenge there is it's really not going to do much. If you're paying $1,500 a month in rent, $1,000, it'll help. And, it will put money directly into the economy. Those people are going to have to spend it either paying their rent or, buying groceries or any of those types of things. So it could put money right directly into the economy. So from that standpoint, it is a good thing. Speaking of rent, if you are renting and you do come on hard times, talk to your landlord. I know these are challenging times. And, so many landlords in cases like this, they're dealing when you have a contract with them, and they can try and evict you, but that's a multiple month-long process, and there's already places that are starting to put in non-eviction type legislation. Just talk to your landlord. And if you're a landlord, talk to your tenant. Work with them. If you have to, push it to where you use their deposit to pay that month's rent just so they can get through, and then make them sign a contract that basically says, like, once they're back on their feet and they have a job again, that they'll pay an extra $200 a month to rebuild that deposit. Get creative. Right now is a time to get creative. The more creative you can be, just like when you're doing stuff in real estate, the more creative you can be, the better you're going to find deals, the better you're going to find all this stuff. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button. And if you enjoy what we're doing here, think about subscribing and hitting that little bell icon, ding, 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 so you can get notified every time we launch a new video. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you soon.